Yep, all set.
Okay. Hello, everybody. As a preliminary matter, I am Tina Burgos, member of the Needham Human Rights Committee. I will be chairing this meeting. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Sophia?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Carrie is absent tonight. Amelia?
Yes.
Belinda is absent tonight. Ashok is absent tonight. Marcus will be joining late. Jared?
Yes.
Bud, is Bud on yet? I believe he's joining us at some point. Marlene?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And Katie. Good evening. This open meeting of the Needham Human Rights Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of the March 12th, 2020, due to the state of the emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting is a webinar and will allow the public to comment. For this meeting, the Needham Human Rights Committee is convening by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or emotions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. I will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. Once I have a list of all public commentators, I will call on each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay.
Tina, did you find
yes.
somebody to do the minutes or do you need me to do the minutes?
Nope, Jared and Sophia have agreed to.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from March 18th, 2021. I did get several of your, it was typos primarily, a couple of spelling errors. Anything else? Does anybody else have anything they need to amend or change on the minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? And a second? Yeah, okay. Sophia?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Amelia?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Marlene?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I am a yes. The minutes from March 18th, 2021 have been approved. The next, I had to amend at the last minute the agenda because of the election. However, because Marcus is coming on late, I told him that we would wait for him for this vote. So is it okay, Katie, if I jump next to the next item?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda is the discrimination complaint process. Marlene
Not
Julie
for
and I-
public participation, isn't?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Is there any public participation tonight?
So there's two people from the public watching, and I just asked them if they want to say something, if they could just use the raise hand feature on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing no hands.
Okay. The discrimination complaint process that we talked about. So Marlene and I had a chair vice chair meeting with, at the time, the chair was Mo Handel, the vice chair was Matt Borelli. And we sort of walked through the goals of what we had talked about at our last meeting. Basically, we really wanted to gauge support for this discrimination complaint process, because as we all know, it's going to be a really lengthy, laborious journey to get from where we are now to a process that the select board, that the town can really buy into and approve. So we did not want to move further until we actually got some buy-in, and we did. That meant that the subcommittee of myself, Marlene, and Julie could go ahead and start the process of figuring out how we wanted to, what we want this to look like, the timelines, who needs to be involved, the different relationships that we need to forge with other stakeholders within the town in order for this to be truly successful. And so our first meeting was last week, and we started to hash this out. The time frame that we gave the select board is about 10 to 12 weeks, because realistically, it's going to take that much time to make sure that we cover all of our bases with everything that's involved with the discrimination complaint process. Marlene, if you just want to talk a little bit about the flow chart that we worked through, and then Julie, I'll ask you to talk about the sort of the timelines that we're thinking about using and some of the intake forms that we found. And then, I can wrap it up as far as next steps are concerned.
So we found that Lexington has a really simple flow chart that shows what happens when someone makes a complaint. It was easy. It's been very easy to find the complaint forms that people fill out, but not so much the process. Doesn't look like places have it on their website, so it's a challenge. So Tina took what we had from that's no longer applicable, but from probably the 90s, the one that Amelia sent us. And, she looked at that, but it's really laborious. So we wanted something that's more simple. And there's Lexington has a very good kind of a flow chart, but we still felt that we needed some more information. So I actually reached out to them. I haven't heard back and asked why it's not on their website. They sent it to me, but it wasn't on their website. And then I went back to Drake, who presented from Arlington, to ask him if he has something, because I don't have the document that talks about their process. But there are things that are important in terms of like how soon you respond, when you have to do the fact finding and all of those kinds of things. And we want to be clear and look at that, because you need to have enough time. This is not a rapid response. People have complaints and we have to do some fact finding. And we have talked about the fact that we are going to do fact finding and try to come to some resolution, some conciliation, not mediation. If it were to go to mediation, that then we would be referring to outside sources. Did I miss anything, Tina or Julie, if you want me to say?
No, I think
Okay.
the Mary Ann Cooley happened to be on a part of the call, which I really appreciated, because one of the things that was made clear to us during the chair vice chair meeting was that we're going to need input from the select board and town council. So if we jump too far ahead, there's a good chance that they're going to yank us back and we'll have to sort of start all over again. So I really appreciated Mary Ann taking, especially that was on Tuesday was election day. So there was quite a lengthy discussion about conciliation versus mediation, the differences between the two, and sort of why we're leaning toward basically cutting the process off on our end at mediation if it gets to that point, because quite frankly, we don't necessarily have the resources to do that. The other towns do. Other towns will take on the mediation piece as well. But as this group is really just starting out and trying to figure out, what we can handle, and making sure that we are doing the best job that we possibly can. We don't want to take on more than we really can handle.
And we'd also have
Um,
trained as mediators. I mean, being a
Right.
mediator is not an easy task.
That's correct.
You still have to be trained in how to do conciliation too, but it's not,
Yes.
you're right, it's not as intense as mediation.
Julie, did you want to talk a little bit about sort of the intake forms and some stuff that you
Sure.
found with the research that you did?
Yeah, so like Marlene said, it hasn't been particularly challenging to find the forms, and they're all fairly similar in terms of kind of information that they collect. So it's, information about the complainant, how they feel they were discriminated against in a broad sense. So like, is it housing? Is it employment? Is it education? Kind of the broad category. And then obviously specifics about the incident in which they're complaining about. Information about the respondent, I believe is the word a lot of them use for the person that's being complained against. And then a lot of them, which we talked about including, which we feel is pretty important to include, is how would you like to see this resolved? Something we've touched on as a large group and in the subcommittee was that a lot of people want to just be heard. So if people can explain that or kind of get at that in this intake form, if we can identify this person just wants to talk to us about it and that would satisfy this complaint, that's going to be really important to identify. Or if it's clearly something that's going to need other resources, obviously we need to figure that out sort of from the get-go. So I don't think that part of it, that creating the form is necessarily a huge challenge for us, but like Tina was saying, and Marlene was saying, it's going to be where we cut it off, how much of our resources we're able to give, that kind of thing.
Yes, Marlene.
The other thing I just wanted to include is that we talked quite a bit about statistics and,
Yes.
Keeping track and knowing where they're coming from, if they're coming directly to us, if we are initiating them, which is another possibility, if they're coming from the police, and then how they're resolved, and then also looking at the categories so that we'll have hopefully simple but good statistics, and then that would go into the annual report.
Marlene also just mentioned the police. So right now, we don't really have, it's a very minimal relationship with the police. And in some of these towns, very successful processes, the HRCs work very closely with the police departments. In some cases, the police departments will funnel the majority of these complaints to the HRC. I mean, they really work hand in hand on identifying issues and resolving them. So I guess shifting to next steps, one of the steps that we're going to take is to try to figure out how we develop a more tangible relationship with the Needham police, identify who those people are going to be. And there has to be obviously a level of relationship and trust that's built there, but I don't think that the process is going to be as successful if we don't involve the police department. It's just not going to work. So I'm going to be talking with Katie next week about how we can start that, who we can start communicating with. Other next steps, Julie's going to start looking at timelines. Again, the current state of the document as it is, it's very, very confusing. So to try to piece it all together, I was trying to do it in my head and I don't even know if the current timeline actually works. So we're trying to figure out some timelines that are reasonable, particularly given that, we only meet once a month. So that is a consideration. One of the things that we did talk about, do we want to bring issues to the entire committee initially and then decide, have the entire committee decide whether or not this is something that the discrimination complaint process team wants to take on or should take on, or do we subcommittee it and try to move things along a little bit faster, given that, the committee, we only meet once a month, and then what happens in the months of July and August, right? When we don't really, and we're kind of taking a break. Bud, you're on me. Oh, yeah.
As far as the police participation in the human rights. In the past, we've had very, very active participation and people who've been members, of the committee for a long period of time. Should we try and identify who that person might be within, the Needham Police Department that would have an interest in this area?
Amelia,
I had a similar thought, but I was thinking, at least looking at the screen, at least 4 of us know John Schlittler well because of the years that we spent together. He was the liaison person on the Human Rights Committee for many, many years. And I'm thinking maybe those of us who have known him in the past might be part of the reach out team to begin those conversations. It's just a thought, but I think we should keep that in mind when we continue forward.
I mean, if you guys feel confident, I don't have any connection over there. So, I would be, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel here, especially if a relationship does exist. So if you feel that there's going to be some progress made with him, then I am totally for it. Cynthia.
Yeah. I think that you're aware that with the Natick Freedom Team, where they do hear complaints, that the chief of police was one of the people who started the process, and he had just come new to the town, and so that's like something he's really part of. And I think we were hearing from Drake from the Arlington Human Rights Commission that they had that the chief of police, either they met regularly with him or he was somehow part of their process.
Both.
And it's different than just delegating somebody, and it's wonderful that they have community connections of the police. So I think that's a critical conversation. I think it would really be hard for any group to take on the complaint process without having a solid understanding or support or way that's an effective way to participate. And I really appreciate your identifying that.
Marlene.
Maybe Amelia and I and Cynthia, if she wants to, could start a conversation with John. What do you think about that, Amelia, Cynthia, since the 3 of us?
Good idea.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Okay. So aside from the police piece of it and figuring out the timeline, as we go through the process, if we need to continue our research with other towns, the 3 of us are going to be involved with that. And also I'm in the process of putting together the flow chart, modeling it off of the Lexington piece, but adding in all of the pieces that Julie, Marlene, Cynthia joined the conversation for a bit, and Marianne. So all of those pieces that we discussed will go into this first draft. And I think once we have that, we're meeting again in about 10 days. We'll discuss it again. And then at our next meeting, I feel like we'll probably be ready to start sharing more concrete things with you guys. How does that sound? Yeah.
That's great. Tina, can you just talk really briefly about how you guys are differentiating mediation and conciliation? Because it sounds like you guys had a good discussion about it. And I'm just wondering, in terms of messaging to the community, what we're kind of offering to people.
Okay, Marlene.
I knew you were going to do that. The first step after the fact finding would be conciliation, to try to get the 2 parties, the complainant and the respondent, together to come to a resolution. And so I would call that the conciliation. And if the conciliation doesn't work and it looks like they need to go to the next step, that would be mediation. And that's where it might be a legal thing that they need. We might refer them to MCAD, or I don't know if there are other resources that we need to look into. And there are some of the towns have it spelled out better than that, with a better kind of definition. And I think we would probably use that. But sort of that's the way I'm understanding it. Does that explain it a bit to you, Jen?
I don't know. To be honest with you, in all of the years I've been practicing law, none of my clients have ever been able to afford either of those options really. And so I don't really understand them very well, but my limited understanding of it was that kind of like with conciliation, that you had a third party who was in a position to kind of make a decision and recommend a resolution, and that with mediation, the third person is there just to try to get the two sides to come to an agreement themselves without necessarily inserting themselves into like offering a good solution. But I don't know. And I guess I'm wondering, because to me,
So it's just the opposite.
I
My
don't know.
understanding is just the opposite.
So we need to get someone to talk to us.
Yeah, so I mean, we can get some of those definitions, but that's my understanding is just the opposite of that. So, so that the person on the Human Rights Committee who, or probably two people, we're probably not going to have just one person doing this. It's the fact finder and then the person who, you know, does the conciliation piece. But it is possible that the fact finder will realize, will come to the point and that says this is not a human rights issue. It's something else, which is also possible. So we'll get it more clarified, but thanks for bringing it up so that we know we need to be more clear on that.
Does anybody else have any other questions, concerns? It's really important that as we move along in this process again, because it is, there's so much effort needs to go into this, you know, that we get as much feedback as possible. So I would rather, you know, the hard work has to, like, we need to put that in now. So if anything comes up or something's, you know, as you're thinking about this, other issues arise, please let us know and we'll, you know, we'll continue to hash it out, because the three of us obviously need the support of everybody, and we need to make sure that everybody has buy-in and is comfortable with what we're putting forward. Cynthia.
I raised this last time, and perhaps it's hard for people to think about, but this is, you know, once there's a format, we know that regardless of what the format is, it's going to take devoted, concentrated work on the part of the people who are involved. And I'm sure that some towns have a subgroup that does it, and we know with Arlington, it was on a rotating basis. But I think that's something that we have to, well, not everybody is going to be continuing on the committee. Some people are graduating, some people are going to other town positions, but that's something, just like you needed the go-ahead from the select board, because it will be ridiculous to spend time without an opening from them. I don't know how we get that out there, that people will really need to commit a significant amount of work, maybe not the whole year, but at least part of the time.
But
I think we could also use this as a recruiting tool. I mean, if people see that our organization has, you know, the ability to really do some things in town where we've been frustrated in the past, I think it would be a way for us to attract some people to the committee also.
Yes, and I think that this is not the only issue that we're going to be working on. I mean, having the conversations that I've been having over the past few weeks since our last meeting with various members of the board, you know, I feel, and now that we have new faces on the board, I think we have a lot of opportunity to do other things. So it's not just this, which means that everybody is going to have to put in the time. And you know, it's something that everybody needs to kind of take themselves to task and say, is this something that I'm willing to do and spend my time on? I understand that human rights is so important to all of us, but there are other ways that you can support if you just don't have the time to do the work. So, you know, I think I agree with both you, Bud and Cynthia, and it's, you know, it's something that we will continue to discuss. I think once Julie, Marlene, and I have sort of really figured out the framework of what needs to happen, it's going to be very clear, you know, the type of people power that needs to go into this. So we'll just keep having those conversations, but we all have to do it. I mean, there's no way that it's going to happen if we don't all commit to some degree, to some level, to this committee. Any other questions, concerns? Yes.
I just want to say one other thing, that these subcommittee meetings that we're having are public meetings. So if Cynthia came, and if you're interested in coming, please feel free to come. But we need to know that you're there. I wouldn't have known it. Cynthia texted me, and then I found out she was there.
Marianne texted me too, and she said, apparently you don't want me at this meeting. Oh my God. Katie.
Just to say that because we record all of our public meetings also, the recording of your subcommittee is up on YouTube. And
Okay, great.
Everything's grouped by HRC. So I, for one, went back and watched the meeting on 2 times speed, no offense. So you can watch it in 30 minutes, and it was very informative.
Okay, fantastic. The next item on the agenda is Nuari, but Jen, do you want to wait until Marcus jumps on? I think he said he's going to try for like 8:15, 8:30, just depends on how things go at the Y. So I think that might be helpful to have him present with you. Is that okay?
Definitely. Yep.
Okay. So the next thing is the Rapid Response Network. Katie, if you want to, I know there's been a lot of discussion about this.
Yes, and if it's okay with you, Tina, I'll share my screen and just run through a slide deck quickly.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. So let's see. Does that look great to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'll run through this deck, but I'll first just say that the Response Network work came out of the Over Zero workshops, and Marlene was the HRC representative on the planning committee for that. And the other planning committee members were Dan Matthews from the select board, Kate and myself for town staff, Rebecca Drill for NDI, and Nicole Argo Benitzak for Over Zero. So Marlene will jump in if I miss anything or if there's questions. So just change my screen for a second. So the Countering Hate and Fostering Inclusion workshop really came out of, I think, a lot of conversations that you all were having before I came to the town, but it ended up being co-hosted by that planning committee and facilitated by Project Over Zero. And the goal was really to talk about identity-based harm and how can the town be better equipped and to understand identity-based harm and how to prevent and respond to it. And the workshop was originally supposed to be in March of 2020, and then everything got flipped on its head. So we ended up doing 3 sessions online this past November and December. There were 51 participants, and I will just say 2.5 hours for 3 times, 3 different sessions. The participation was incredibly consistent, and people seemed really engaged. So it was a very diverse group of workshop attendees. These are various affiliations of the people who attended. And these were really the goals of the workshop. And I'd say first and foremost was relationship building, but then really understanding how our own social identities inform identity-based harm and how we can positively or negatively respond to those. And really understanding kind of past events, future risk of events, what are some communication strategies to think through, and what are best practices for response networks that exist in other places. And just fundamentally, I think you all know this, but a response network is really taking a disparate group of people and figuring out how do you actually coordinate as one in a rapid fashion if there has been violence or harm. And really the goal is first and foremost to talk to the affected community and see what they want for support and what they would find helpful. And then thinking through how do you make sure to
prevent any immediate escalation of the divisiveness and reduce long-lasting harms and hopefully set more positive norms moving forward. So during the workshop in our third session, we put forward a draft Needham Resilience and Response Network structure. It was a 2-page document. The link is there, and I think it was in the material sent to everyone earlier last week. But what's on the screen in front of you is just an outline of the first draft of this is what a steering committee could look like. And we used that third session to get responses and feedback from the workshop participants. And the 3 biggest things that we heard was that we really needed to expand the steering committee membership, make sure that there were representatives of groups that we know are likely to be targeted on the front end, have them be part of the steering committee, and be very explicit about how diverse that steering committee needs to be. The last item was there was a lot of discussion about having the network live within the town as a function of government and having community buy-in and participation. And actually what we heard was that people wanted it the other way around, to be community-based with town participation. So having heard that, I took a crack at a second draft. Again, it's linked here. And fundamentally, the things that were changed were directly responsive to what we heard. So the steering committee was expanded to 15 members. 4 of those listed here would be kind of explicitly these 4, whatever individual holds these 4 roles in the town. But the other 9 roles we weren't prescriptive about, but we were explicit about needing diversity across those members. And we changed the structure to be a program of a local 501c3 nonprofit. Some other updates, and again, this was based on our workshop discussion, was to lead with a purpose, which seems obvious now, but it came out of a lot of questions about, when would the network kind of spring into action, and how to focus the network for a clear purpose. We also created a front door. There were a lot of questions about where would a community member go if they felt like an incident that had happened that warranted a response. So in the second draft, we kind of established phone number and email, having that. We added a more robust set of network norms and guiding principles. This is not exhaustive to what is in the second draft document, but these were the items that were added after the discussion. We also put in priorities. So people, of course, are action-oriented, and this group did not disappoint on that front. And so people wanted to know, okay, what would we do right away? How would we get this set up and running? And so in the second draft, there's this list of the first things that the network could take on. Lastly, I'd say there was a lot of questions and discussion about wanting more context, or wanting to put the network into more context. Questions around how do we make sure the network's not redundant to what other groups might already be doing, or efforts underway, or if there's an incident of violence or harm that's likely would involve a criminal element, or a police involvement. And so how does a community-based response tie into a kind of first responder response, things like that. And then also questions around the intersection between a response network and a discrimination complaint process. So this slide is my best attempt to lay out what I think I heard around incident response continuum. So if you start at the top left, it's, what are the ongoing efforts to really prevent discrimination and hate? And this is the whole suite of activities happening in the Needham community, from this group and Nuari and the town efforts to all the community-based organizations that are doing social justice work or equity work or acts of kindness, you name it, and building positive community. Then if you move to the top right, it's, if an incident occurs, this may be an arson, it could be graffiti, it could be a bomb threat, it could be a shooting. There is a first response that is going to happen from the relevant public safety, public health, medical community. That is always going to happen. And I think why it's segmented out, if we go down to the bottom right, is a community response following the incident is really where the response network fits in to figure out, should the community, aside from the first responder response, should the community respond in a way that the network is equipped to in terms of reaching all 4 of those goals that was outlined earlier for a response network. And then lastly, going to the bottom left, after a response or an incident happens, I think the thought is that the response network would kind of maybe do an after action or a debrief to understand both how the response went well or didn't, but also what they learned about what caused that incident or further fueled that incident, and feed that back into the broader infrastructure across Needham that is doing the preventative work. So I think the network in and of itself wouldn't be an additive kind of body duplicating work already happening, but they would inform all of the other groups and stakeholders that are doing that preventative work all the time. So lastly, this is a completely incomplete slide because we were asked the question, how do you differentiate between when to go to the response network and when to go to discrimination complaint process? And I think my answer right now is that I do feel like they will be very clear at some point. It just needs to run the course, and the discrimination complaint process work needs to keep going. So watch the space as your group works through all of this. And just to end, next steps. So the planning committee, we have kind of wound down, sent a final email out to workshop participants, basically summarizing what I've just walked through. And you all had known from your previous meetings, and because there's cross-representation between HRC and NDI, that the Needham Diversity Initiative Board of Directors had talked about being the home for a Needham Resilience and Response Network. Their board voted to do that pending securing financing. I think they felt like they needed somebody with time or expertise or both to help them get it up and running, but I'll leave it to members here if they want to say more about that. So really, any discussion we have tonight, I think my goal is that it would be great to get HRC's feedback to NDI as they continue and kind of like pick up where this is left off and run with it. So let me stop sharing so I can see everyone, and then happy to open up to questions. And Marlene.
The only thing that I would add is that this is a framework, and it will really be up to that steering committee how many members they end up having and how they move forward. But Katie did an amazing job of putting all of this together based on the workshops. I think it's really comprehensive, but organically things may shift a bit once a steering committee is put in place. So it was draft and nothing set in stone. I just wanted to be clear about that.
Yeah, great point.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Jen?
I just want to comment and just say, wow, you guys have just done such an amazing job capturing 3 really intense, long, substantive meetings, not to mention the years of what you've put in before that, to put it on in such a clear presentation, I think is really fantastic. And I think that the community is going to be really excited to see something like this launch. So thank you very much. everybody that's had some work in that, because it looks really good.
Katie gets all the credit.
All that years of work beforehand, you said. I wasn't even here.
You
So
get all the credit for.
I'll take the credit for the slide deck.
Yeah, and synthesizing it. She's amazing.
That's great though. That's really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is it the part of the next steps you said was, NDI trying to figure out the funding? Is that correct? Resources to put this in place?
I'm happy to answer it, but I'm also looking at some faces that are, I believe, on the board, so I don't want to speak.
Amelia.
And Cynthia Cynthia, go ahead.
No, Amelia, go ahead.
Well, we had our meeting last night. The last two meetings were very intense. We spent a lot of time discussing this. I think the funding, right now, we're at the point of trying to find a source of funding. And last night, there was one source that was recommended, and we're exploring that. But I think once that happens, I think things will move along more quickly. Keep in mind, NDI is in very much the same position as the Human Rights Committee. We're in transition where there's new leadership. We're trying to get our act together as a group in terms of our structure and what we want to commit to, because there are lots of things that we could be involved with at this time. But I want to reiterate what Cynthia mentioned earlier. This is another responsibility that someone on the Human Rights Committee will have to take, because we have to have a representative from the Human Rights Committee on the steering committee. And that will involve meetings in addition to Human Rights Committee meetings or NDI meetings. So just keep that in mind. This will be a major responsibility, but I think a very exciting one. I'm really excited about the people in NDI who are willing to offer their ideas and their commitment to this. Cynthia, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I echo what Jen has said, and this is really, I think I learned this from the Women's Studies Department at Wellesley College, a work in progress, that it's almost like a male thing, that this is it, kind of, and that all of their papers, they talked about being a work in progress to indicate that it's a living kind of thing. And I find myself getting over in that other camp. Well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? I think the intention is there. And then a lot of it will be figuring it out. And there's some incredible resources in our town right now that Nicole Argo decided to live in Needham because of some of the things she saw happening here and what she can give from her organization and background of having the framework of the social science, and which may allow the granting kind of thing for funding, but also will give us a structure as we're looking at what things are working, what things need to change. And I see there's several areas that are, they haven't really been solved by other towns, so we may be able to figure them out. How do you have ownership by the town in a way that allows fast and independent action, but doesn't just give it over to a group that itself may be open to criticism? How do you develop that? And there isn't an answer to that yet, but as long as that's held there as one of the things that needs to be answered. Another one we've just talked about in terms of the complaint process, the same kind of issues come up about the role of the police and public safety when you're looking at rapid response. How do you develop that so that it's a congenial relationship, but it's also one that's going to allow some independence of action and some ownership by the town? So I see those, as long as we have out front what some of the questions are as you go along, that they aren't all going to be answered now. And this document has identified a lot of things, and I think that it can work with this as a preliminary structure, knowing that you can't reinvent it every month, but to have this as a starting place. And I think there's tremendous support from NDI. Again, they're used to mainly particularly owning a project. And it's not, as Nicole said, it's not having it under the NDI so much as giving it a home. And people aren't really used to that, but I think that can happen.
Jen?
I think the other thing about it to me is that what the response network is really about are the relationships more than the process and what's going to happen next. And it would seem like, you know, as the relationships continue to gel over this, that the process will kind of reveal itself, I think, as to what makes sense. And that the most important thing to me is that getting all of these folks kind of committed to the idea that it's good and appropriate and, you know, something that we should be doing in town in terms of, you know, a couple of years ago, I felt like we were still kind of trying to convince either the town government or the town just in general, like we need to talk about human rights. We need to talk about human rights. And now I feel like we've gotten consensus, you know, which is really big, I think. And so that no matter how this plays out, we've gotten the people together. And I think that that's really going to be the important piece of it, because there's lots of smart people, you know, involved in this that can, I don't know, figure out, because I would imagine that at least for a while, every different kind of event that might trigger this response network is going to be different, so that it's going to have to be nimble just by definition. Hey, Marcus.
Hey, how are you? Sorry I'm late. Sorry. It's been a long day.
Been a long week, Marcus.
It really has. It really has.
Marcus, we're talking about the rapid response network. We wanted to wait for you to discuss the Nuwari piece.
Okay.
I do want to say on the this is very helpful for me because I'm actually meeting with Rebecca Young, Rebecca Drill, and Ramin next week just to introduce myself, because there is such a close connection between the two groups. So this will definitely give me some things to discuss with them and just to get an idea of, you know, what's going on with NDI and how we can support each other. So I do appreciate the conversation, and sort of a little bit, Marlene has been great in giving me background on, you know, where HRC stands with NDI, EJN, different groups. So it's been very helpful, and I'll let you guys know what comes out of that conversation at our next meeting. Marlene?
Yeah, I'm just curious if Amelia and Cynthia have they established officers at NDI yet?
Temporary, and June, we'll do that in June.
Not till June, okay.
But temporarily, Rebecca Drill is, I don't know whether it's called interim president, because of being a nonprofit, we had to have somebody taking that position. And she was the vice president, which doesn't really exist in the corporation thing, but did within the NDI structure.
Yeah, I knew that she was taking the lead, but okay.
Yeah. Do I have that right, Amelia? Okay.
Are there any other comments, questions on the Rapid Response Network? Okay, great. Thank you, Katie, very much. I know, Julie, you have to hop off. Can you stay just for a minute to get this vote through? Okay, so because the election happened on Tuesday night, thank you, Jen, for the suggestion, and she and I co-wrote the statement together. It was not able to post it on the agenda initially, and so now it's sort of this emergency vote that we need to take about a statement regarding the election and the new direction, obviously, of the select board. Marcus, congratulations. Fantastic, and I hope you've recovered from last night's meeting. I could see, I was telling Marianne this morning, like, you know, like 9:30, 9:45, I could start to see everybody just start to It's like we're 4 hours in. I was exhausted from it. So
I was like, oh man, it's been 3 hours. It's been 4. Oh wow, it's 5 hours now. I was like, okay. Well, we held it in strong, and we finished up.
Well, if I could just quickly, because Julie's got to jump off, I'm going to read the statement that we wrote. I made a couple of minor adjustments based on some feedback that I got today. And then I will ask for a motion to approve and a second, and then we'll vote on it. Is that cool? Okay. The Needham Human Rights Committee would like to congratulate Lakshmi Balachandra and Marcus Nelson on their historic election wins for select board members. As the first people of color to be elected to the board, we are excited to collaborate with this diverse body to continue our mission of making Needham a more inclusive and welcoming place for all who reside, work, and visit our community. The significant increase in civic engagement in this election demonstrates exciting opportunities for progress and executing Nuwari's Needham United Against Racism initiative, recently adopted mission statement. Needham will be a community free of racism, racial bias, prejudice, and discrimination. Our residents, schools, businesses, organizations, and government will work together to identify barriers to racial equity and create solutions, opportunities, resources, and support for removing them. For the first time in the history of Needham, we are experiencing what Nuwari named as Guiding Principle 1A. People of color will see others of color in leadership roles in government, business, the school system, and civic groups. The business of advocating for human rights in Needham is deeply enhanced by having many different perspectives represented in analyzing any situation. Today, we have more voices than ever at the table to do this work. The Needham Human Rights Committee is eager to continue to join forces with the Select Board to amplify community concerns and protect human rights. We also want to extend our gratitude to Maurice Handel and John Bullion for their support and allyship during their tenures. Their commitment to furthering human rights initiatives has always been appreciated and will truly be missed. Yes, Bud. You're on mute.
Well stated. I move that we accept the statement.
Marlene?
I noticed that you signed it yourself, and I think it should be signed by all of the members of the committee.
Yes.
So, because on what you sent out, but otherwise I think it's great. So that's would be my addition. That
I will make that change. Absolutely. Any other discussion? I'm sorry, do we have a second to Amelia? Yes, okay. Okay, so let's take a vote on this, again with the amendment to add everybody's names to the statement. Where's my list? Sophia?
Yes.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Amelia?
Yes.
Marcus?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Bud?
Yes.
Marlene?
yes.
Julie?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So with the amendment that Marlene had suggested, this will go to Katie for publication. Great. Thank you, guys. Yes.
So when you said publication, so it will go on our website and where else? And can this be sent to the local papers? I don't know, Katie, where
Will
would you?
Cynthia, will Cindy be handling that? Does that go to her so she can disseminate?
Yes, she, our public information officer, Cindy Roy Gonzalez. So I'll send it to her and she keeps a press list, and Sandy can get it up on the website and social media.
Great, thank
Bud?
you.
It'd be wonderful if we could get something like this in the Metro West section of the globe. I mean, that would be fabulous.
There is a reporter that reports on Needham, so I think his name is escaping me, but I know he's on City's list.
Talk about Trevor? Or...
No,
someone else, okay.
It's a Globe reporter, Noah. This is why we have a PIO.
Great. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Julie. Okay, let's circle back to Nuwari. I know there's a lot going on with you guys in the listening session on Monday. So if Jen and Marcus want to give us an update on what's happening.
Jen, do you want to go first or?
So I want to start with a question if I could, Tina,
Okay.
because I'm not sure, I know that Marianne or Sandy maybe had sent out the principles and the mission to a lot of different boards and community groups and committees to encourage them to adopt it. Do we also get that kind of request, or did that not come directly to Human Rights?
She sent it to me and then I sent it to you guys.
I can't remember. It was coming from so many different places.
Well, and also
A lot
for-
happening.
I think she sent 3
we
different
got
email
it.
messages because she sort of sent everything at once and then she forgot to send another thing. And then the last message was, that's why I sent both. I sent 2 different messages because there were 2 documents that went with there were 4 documents in total, 2 really related to each other, the other 2 related to each other, but I didn't want to send it all at once because there wouldn't have been any context and it would have been very confusing. So I just basically took Sandy's lead. She sent me the documents and then she said, split it this way. And that's how I ended up sending everything out.
So are we being asked as a town committee to like adopt or endorse the statements and all that? Okay.
So, and yes, and it went to everybody. So for example, I'm on the Council of Economic Development. Adam Block, who is the chair there, sent the same thing to us. And we'll talk about it at our next meeting. But yeah, yes.
I heard from some people on the Needham Community Farm that they just decided to adopt it. That's exciting. It's getting out there, and I would love to hear what you guys all think, because I have definitely gotten mixed feedback. I think from some folks who are involved with organizations that, like the farm, who don't necessarily have this as part of their everyday mission and conversation, it sounded like excited to talk about it and adopt it. And then groups who maybe already kind of, this is their jam. And so that they felt like it didn't really fit with, like they were, 10 steps ahead of where our statements were from Newari. So I'm curious what you guys how it landed on you.
Amelia.
Well, we had a very long, intense discussion last night at the Needham Diversity Initiative meeting. And they made a good point. I think they are very much, first of all, the term adopt or endorse, endorsement was more favorable than adopting. And they also have their own set of guidelines and rules. But I think that they want to endorse and they're very supportive. However, as it stands as just a statement is not enough. That there is interest in a document, a draft of responses is being written at this point. But some of the points that were made at our meeting last night was that it's really important for the next steps to be included. How will this be implemented? It can't stop with a written document. And based on that, I think there would be an endorsement on the part of NDI if there was some additional information about how this will continue and how it will be implemented in the community.
How it's being measured, Amelia,
Measured.
and how we're being held accountable for these standards. I think that's something that we wanted to know as well, and that we haven't really figured out exactly how that's going to happen. Is from what we were told by Marianne and Matt, that the select board is going to be holding everyone accountable for these in some capacity, but the steps on how that's being done has not been determined yet. And Newari doesn't have, the power or the wherewithal to actually hold people accountable, because our job was basically and has been to make recommendations and suggestions and things for the select board to take from us and kind of disperse out to people about how we can, and Katie and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, and how suggestions and things that we make, they can adapt or they can adopt, and then those into the select board, and then ask people to join in or to do that instead of mandating people or organizations to do that. And there's more than that, Katie or Jen, but I feel like as far as new RE, we don't have that jurisdiction to hold people accountable, and it's going to be on the select board to do this.
Marlene.
And following up on what you said, Marcus, I was wondering who's going to hold whose ever head it is to the fire. Who's going to be evaluating it? Not just how they're going to do it, but this is an ongoing process. This is not a one and done. And who's going to be empowered to be sort of the watchdog over all of this? I didn't get that from the document.
Yeah, and I don't think that. Oh, Jen, do you want to go ahead? I don't want to cut you off.
I do. I was just going to say, I don't think that this document was ever intended to answer that particular question. I
Correct.
think that part of where we really missed an opportunity, I guess, let's put it that way, is in the way that we communicated kind of what this was, because Nuari, I'm trying to see if I have it in my notes here quickly, was charged with like a couple of different particular tasks. One of them was coming up with the mission and the guiding principles.
Vision.
But if you read the report that I think Katie painstakingly put together, a kind of explaining the progress of Nuari up to this point, it's very clear from the report that nobody on Nuari is trying to say, hey, this is it. Isn't this great? We're all done. It was really, this is coming out now because we were obligated to give a report to the select board and to town meeting as to like where we are now. And there's been lots of conversations on the Nuari about where does accountability fit in? How do we measure success and who's responsible for all this? But we just haven't even gotten to that place where we've even started hammering out what the answers to those questions would be, because literally it's taken us, I don't know what, it's been like 6 months or so just to get the mission statement and the principles and the intentional practices together. So I think that we did not necessarily do a good job explaining to the community that nobody was putting this out there as like, okay, Nuari's done. This was meant to be an update of like where we are, and this particular set of ideas is being put out there to try to get everybody in town in the many different ways that they are engaged in town, kind of on the same page and thinking about how Needham is going to tackle race equity. So I think that there are a couple of very big misconceptions. One being that this was the final product and like Nuari was wrapping up. And two, that Nuari was like going to be this longstanding new arm of bureaucracy in Needham. So I think that if people understood that piece of it, it maybe would have landed a little bit better than it did. But I don't know.
Yeah, and I think with that being said, I think the charge for New RE was only supposed to be 1 year, at first when we started this, and now it's going to be extended another year to kind of follow up on these things that we put out. But I know some of what Marianne and Matt talked about as well is that the goal is once we determine how we're going to measure and hold people to the fire and accountable, we're going to task, I believe, with some of the other committees to kind of spearhead or be held accountable for kind of measuring that as well. And there's so much that has happened over all these months. And there's still, as far as we think we've kind of come, as far as getting this together and things that we've done, it's only barely scratched the surface on where we should be and where we can be. So it's one of those things where I think if people would have known, like Jen said, that this was only supposed to be a working group and it's not a committee, it was established for a year to kind of get the ball rolling and make aware that racial equity is something we really want to focus on in Needham, and have other other committees and organizations kind of follow suit and make sure it's a priority, and things that we do, how we hire, how we manage, all those things, to get that in people's heads and part of their infrastructure. And then next task is going to be how we're going to really hold people accountable for this. And Katie, chime in as well. because I
I
just want
wanted
to make sure.
you guys just
Yeah.
for a second that I found the charge that we got, and I just want to read it to you so you can hear what I'm saying. So number 1 was to articulate the recommended vision for racial equity in Needham and guiding principles. That is the only one of the 5 pieces of the charge that's marked as completed. The next one is establishing protocols and practices for getting community feedback. That one is
Here.
labeled as not started. The third one is setting up communication structures to ensure sustainability and accountability of the initiative, also marked not started. The fourth one is discussing and prioritizing other recommendations that have been submitted to the select board. That one's listed as in process. And then the last one is making recommendations to the select board for future action, also in process. So the 2 really big ones, we haven't even like cracked the book on it yet.
That's helpful.
Katie,
I guess the 2 thoughts I just wanted to add was some of the feedback that the Nuwari working group got. I think there's a real tension between wanting action and concrete goals and metrics and steps. And actually some of the feedback was you're not there yet, and don't jump to those hard actions until you've really dissected underlying causes, or you've really heard from people who have been impacted personally. So it's, I think it really is a balancing act and a constant tension between we're not going to solve racism tomorrow, but we should always be pushing to do that. So that's been interesting for me as staffing the committee. The only other thought I'd say is I think this idea of looking for one place to hold all other people accountable, also a tension with town governance and the charter. It is a decentralized government by design. So there are elected boards all across the town: planning board, the finance committee, the conservation commission, the park and recreation commission. The select board does not have authority over them. And so there are varying levels of authority and purview and legal and formal and informal. But I think that is for Nuwari to talk through, is how do you bring people along with you when you need them to decide on their own that they want to be doing this as well.
Marlene?
So I just want to go back to know exactly what we are being asked tonight. If we are being asked to take a vote to endorse this initial stage of what was presented, or are we just asked to have a discussion about it like we've just been doing?
Cynthia. Okay, yep, Cynthia.
I'm just going back to, I presume Katie was partly the one who wrote this that we got on April 1st, and because I wasn't clear about that either. We're asked to consider adopting the vision and principles, and this is probably even more important, integrating these concepts in your work plans, programs, and goals. For us as the Human Rights Committee, this vision is very much a part of what we have already. The second part is we're interested in your perspectives and input going forward, and to appreciate you letting us know what approaches and actions you plan to take. And we've been focusing on kind of what Nuwari would do, but it looks like it's a kind of mobilizing of town committees and organizations to say, hey, are we all on the same page about where we're wanting to go? And is this something that you would embrace as part of your work? And I would think that it would be very straightforward that we say, yes, it is part of our work. And furthermore, part of our work is to want to see what the town is going to do.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Do we want to take this to a vote to adopt this first piece of Katie, did you have something?
Oh, no, I think Cynthia answered the question, but I think the ask is for a formal vote to endorse.
I would say endorse and not adopt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are you making a motion?
And
Bud?
we endorse the statement.
Okay,
We endorse the initial stage of the Nawari's report. Yeah.
okay,
I'll second it.
great. Sophia,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes,
Jen,
Yes.
Amelia,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Bud,
Yes.
Marlene,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So we will endorse the Nuari statement and continue the conversations as, as things move along. What are your next steps, Jen and Marcus? When are you guys meeting next, and what's happening now?
We're meeting again on the 26th, and I think that Mary Lammy from the schools is coming back. To be honest with you, I don't really know what is next. I think that we have a lot of things bubbling up on that committee that there was some time crunch in terms of trying to get the mission statement and the principles out in time for a town meeting rather.
Yes.
I think that the next steps that we're looking at are probably even harder than the ones that we just did. So I don't really know, honestly, what's coming next. I don't know if Marcus or Katie have any better insight into it.
I'll just say the group needs to take a final vote on the report to town meeting on the 26th. But then those two items of the Nuari charge that Jen read that haven't been started yet. So figuring out the accountability structures and figuring out systems to consistently get input from people of color and people marginalized by their race or ethnicity are the two items the group hasn't tackled yet that are up next.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Next on the agenda is the Indigenous Peoples Day initiative that Amelia and Cynthia have been working on. Can we get an update from you guys? Fernanda and Nick, they did a great job, by the way. I don't know if anybody got a chance, but their presentation was fantastic. And really, their personal stories were very, very compelling. So it was really, if you didn't get a chance to see that, I strongly encourage you to go back and find the footage because they did a great job.
And it's near the beginning of the school committee meeting, so you don't have to go through the whole meeting. We have been impressed with them. They really have done a lot of work on their own. I thought Cynthia and I talked about this and just give you an overview of what happened. Initially, Fernanda came to NDI and with the support of Rebecca Drill, asked the NDI for ideas and feedback about changing the name Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And members of NDI formed the subcommittee. Julie Reich joined that committee, and then eventually Nick, who's an 8th grader, got on board as well. So he and Fernanda became the student representatives. They made based on Rebecca Drill's recommendation, they made a presentation to the select board. But it was not an official presentation. They came 15 minutes before the select board meeting and proposed their idea. And they were told that they needed to get more feedback and think about it more carefully. So they came to a human rights committee and they asked for our support. And Katie provided some guidelines for a proposal, for an official proposal that they would bring to the select board, and with excellent ideas. And the intent was to help them present a strong case. So Cynthia and I joined the subcommittee. We're members of the subcommittee, and Marcus also. The three of us volunteered to be on this subcommittee. And we presented them with the guidelines, and they were accepted. They were appreciated. But I think they realized when they saw the guidelines how much work needed to be done, particularly in getting research and presenting a strong case. So what they decided to do was to reach out to the community and see how the community felt and get feedback from the community. And they did that by first presenting at a Needham Diversity Initiative summit. And they had a workshop presentation. And I was at the presentation. And they presented opposing points of view and got lots of interesting feedback from the community. They also approached, excuse me, Dan Gutekens and then the school committee and requested, and also to get feedback from the faculty. And what they did, and this was their initiative, they did a survey of the faculty and the students. And we're talking about hundreds of people. And there was a lot of support for changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day on the school calendar. This is not the town officially, this is a separate thing. And they made that presentation at the school committee. So there will be a vote on that, I think in a couple of weeks, the next school committee meeting.
27th, yep.
27th, end of April. And the next steps, we haven't met yet, but we're going to wait. The subcommittee will wait until after that vote by the school committee, and we'll be talking about the next steps. What they have done, and Julie has been wonderful. She's a great facilitator and supporter of the students. They started a Google document, and they are now accumulating research, and they are reaching out to Indigenous groups and people. They're working closely. Julie has been working closely with World of Wellesley, and they're also reaching out to other communities. But the guiding principles are going to come from Indigenous people. And they have also attended, upon our recommendation, events by the Massachusetts Center for Native American Awareness. And they had, on October 5th, they had a wonderful sharing circle where people, both Indigenous and not Indigenous people, were local activists working to affect change in their communities. And they talked about things they did that were effective. And Julie and Fernanda attended that. So they are still gathering the research, and they're very interested in moving forward, but we'll give you more information at our next meeting.
Marcus?
They've done an absolutely amazing job. And I think when they presented to the school committee, which if some of you didn't get a chance to see yet, when you see their responses from the school committee and their sincere gratitude and appreciation for the thoughtfulness that the kids, young leaders, I'll say, presented with, it was really heartfelt, and it was really admirable. You know, see someone that's a junior in high school and in 8th grade to do what they've done, and with that kind of stewardship and leadership, it's hard not to be inspired, with the generation that's coming up. And when you want something, they go and get it. It's like they don't want to see it at the table. They want to flip it over for a good reason. So it's good to be behind that and to be supporting that.
Marlene?
I just have a question, unless I missed it in your very thorough presentation, Amelia. I understand that they're going to school committee, but if Needham were to adopt it, is that something that is decided at town meeting or the select board? Who would make that determination when they've done their due diligence and done all their research? Where would that happen?
I think there's a couple different ways that can happen. That could be something that's put out, I think, to the community to vote on. That's one way they can do it. And then also there can be a request. I believe it's a special article or something like that. I talked to Dan Matthews about it, but I think I need more information. Katie may know a little bit more, but there's a couple different ways to go about it before it gets to the select board to approve it. I think that'd be the last step.
So the way it worked in Wellesley was that it was a very contentious, one of the most contentious, apparently. I spoke with one of the representatives of WOW, She said it was one of the most contentious issues that they've had in a very long time, because there was a very small but extremely vocal and aggressive group of Italian Americans who were very against Indigenous Peoples Day. The select board did not want to take it on because they did not want to seem like they were taking sides. So what they ended up doing was basically shifting it to a referendum so that it was up to the town to decide what they wanted to do with this issue. Apparently the select board could have unilaterally voted on this, but again, it was not something that they wanted to touch. It was too sort of caustic. So if our governments kind of are set up in a similar way, I would imagine that it could kind of go one of two ways here in Needham. Cynthia.
Julie Reich has been in touch with the with Indigenous Peoples Group, including the statewide one, where they've been involved with what's happened in many towns. And evidently the way the process went in Wellesley is not how it's necessarily gone other places. And she's, I think, being a good communicator for this effort. And while this is unusual because for adults to really listen to the leadership of young people, we're not used to that. And it's really an important step for us to learn to do that, but also through Julie with the connection with the state, to learn how this has worked in other places. Because we want to build relationships among people and understanding of Indigenous peoples. We're not just trying to win a point of putting a date on the calendar. And I think that everybody who's part of that committee is aware that this is a very special process, and that it's important to take time and the kind of questions that Katie brought from the select board, they really deserve to have answers to those things before it gets brought to them. But in the meantime, it's where we're at with the community and getting the support from this group.
Amelia?
I thought Reverend Katie made an excellent opening statement at the school committee meeting from her perspective as an Italian American. And I think that sort of set the tone. And if they could build on that, I think it will provide a very different perspective for people of Italian heritage to think that their heritage is not being taken away or somehow diminished, but rather that this myth has grown out of proportion, and that we need to take a careful look at why we are celebrating that holiday as Columbus Day. And then also the statements that both students made, their own, what drove them to
Right.
be involved in this. I thought that was also, so if they build on this and continue, I think maybe their arguments might be persuasive.
Great. Thank you guys for working on that. It's fantastic. We have a few minutes left, so I'd like to run through reports. Katie, anything from the select board?
I might have to pass this torch to Marcus at the next meeting. But for now, I guess I'll just say that one of the agenda items on the select board's meeting last night was the town had received a request about renaming the accessible reservoir trail off of Dedham Ave behind the Public Services Administration building to honor the memory of David Summergrad. And so there will be a memo coming out that I will get to all of you. Basically, the select board voted to open it up to public comment. The proposed name is the Amity Path in honor of David Summergrad. But there'll be a memo explaining kind of the various feedback and input that we've gotten so far. And the request from the select board is for this group, Park and Recreation, Conservation Commission, and the Commission on Disabilities at a minimum to formally discuss it at one of your future meetings, the next one if possible, to give that feedback back to the select board before they make any decisions.
Said it was last night, at least 30 days, I believe it was, Katie.
Yeah. I think it'll take at least that to get
At
on
least, got it.
all the board and committee
feedback
agendas
from
and then
everybody.
back. Yeah. That's it.
Marlene.
Okay, so Amelia was monitoring the Gmail account that we have, and a comment or came in that someone would like to talk to somebody to see if there were supports available to her based on her brother being executed by the police, not in Needham, in February 2020, and that his rights were violated. And anyway, I volunteered to follow up, and I just wanted to let you all know that I contacted the woman who it was not a complaint, but who contacted us. And she was feeling that his rights were violated, but what was most shocking was that the police investigate themselves, and that she felt that this was not impartial nor transparent. This happened in Brookline. So I called her and discussed with her what she was looking for, and talked to her. She's been in touch with the New England Innocence Project. Her biggest issue, she's got a lawsuit going, and her biggest issue is that the police they investigate themselves, and she didn't think that that was appropriate. And so I said, well, what is it that you would like us to do? And she thought that we might educate the community about this issue to get to the truth, and to have outside people investigate police rather than police doing their own investigations. I'm sorry that Belinda's not here to even comment on that. So I said to her that I would bring this to the committee to see if you had any suggestions, that I didn't know that this was something we would be taking on in terms of educating the community. But I did say that EJN has done some work in looking into policing, and that she should be in touch with EJN. She did not know about EJN, and so she thanked me for that. She said, there may be nothing that you can do, but I wanted to bring this to your attention. And I think she was really asking for us to sort of bring forth an educational forum. She wants justice for her brother. I guess, that's really the piece. And I don't know who was to blame. I didn't get into any of that piece with her, but I just wanted to see what it was that she wanted. I said I would bring it to you and tell you, what we discussed, and see if the committee had any other recommendations or ideas, or and I would just get back to her. If we have no other suggestions, that's fine. But she was very nice. So I don't know if
How'd she end up coming to us as opposed to Brookline or other communities?
she lives in Needham.
Oh, okay.
She lives in Needham. So so that's why she came to us.
Does anybody have any
This is
thoughts
the
or
kind of thing
suggestions?
we might get, that it's not really a complaint, but it's a concern, and that we might be responding to something like this.
So Amelia had a similar, and this is going to be, we're going to talk about it more at length at the next meeting. We had an inquiry. It wasn't even an inquiry. It was a student from Pollard who wrote into the account about bullying, and stating the importance of educating others on why bullying is such a horrible thing happening, and it's becoming more prevalent. So these types of things, I think that we do need to kind of figure, again, they're not complaints, but we also, if they're coming to us, I think we have a responsibility to at least just say, okay, we hear you, but how do we do that in a respectful way? And making sure, as Marlene, you asked, what do you want from us? How can we help you? That's a separate process from the discrimination complaint process, but I think that is something that we do need to talk about and sort of hammer out how we want to handle those in the future, because they do come through to us, on a regular enough basis where it's something that we should be prepared to handle.
And I think in the past, what we've done educational forums when we've seen that there was an issue that we thought we should handle. We haven't done anything in a long time. I don't even remember the last one we did, Jen. You probably remember, but I can't even remember what the last one was. I'm not suggesting that this is one that we want to tackle. I think it's pretty dicey. So
Kind of timely though. I mean, that's the understatement of the century, but I'm just thinking of like the Tidwell report and kind of the statements within that report that we're finding kind of our own internal investigations not great.
yeah,
So like I think we would probably get a ton of interest in trying to, I can't think of the frame for it, but like having some kind of discussion in the community about police oversight, like who gets to decide when somebody's done something wrong is kind of an interesting question right now that I think we haven't really grappled with directly. So it's interesting that she's talking about a different case, but I feel like we have a pretty good example, a homegrown example to talk about too, which I know we couldn't talk necessarily about that specific incident, but it just makes me think that might be an issue that people would be really interested in having some dialogue about. But I don't know exactly who we would bring in to do the education, and if we would be.
It would have to be some legal people.
Yeah, but there are, excuse me for jumping in mainly in cities, police civilian review boards. And I know the person who's head of the one in Cambridge. In fact, he's like head nationally of that. So that larger cities actually have that kind of group. And I don't know what it translates into with towns, but I mean, probably a number of people are acquainted with that. That's a good example, though, how we have over the years learned from people who brought individual situations, like the family that talked about their child being targeted because of his race. And we didn't have a solution for that family, and they actually moved to another town. I think Marlene was involved with being in touch with them, but it helped inform us about a situation that eventually led to the equity audit. But that was, so we are learning as we listen.
So I guess my question is, I told her when this meeting was, I said she was, welcome to come. She didn't say that she would, but is there, should I just go back and tell her that it's an interesting topic? We're not ready to take it on right now, but we might in the future, or not?
Well, I mean, we have discussed, in the past couple of meetings before sort of, we got into our priorities and what we want to move forward with. One of the pieces was the education process. And there has been a little bit of discussion about policing. So I don't think that it's so far off that, we're not going to get to it. Jen, you've been in touch with Denise's office. Belinda said that she was going to report back to us sometime next month about her training and new procedures that are being put into place. So I think you can say that we'll, if we get this program off the ground, we'll definitely let her know, but it's not something, I wouldn't take it completely off the table because it is something that we have discussed in the past couple of months.
Okay.
And it was something that it sounded like from what Belinda said the last meeting that the chief was open to having some kind of community dialogue. We were more specifically focused on kind of what the new reforms were.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, in July and December, like they're still waiting to hear what rolls down from that. And as far as what I think, as far as internal investigations, I think that was something in the Tidwell report that was recommended that we kind of take a look at. I feel like in some capacity. So we're waiting to get more information. I know Belinda was going to report back, but I know July, we should hear some things and then the rest of the things by December. But also I think we're going to take a look at what our floor or ceiling is going to be, I think, before we get all that information. But some of it we're going to have to wait on, but that's definitely something that's, I think, being looked at, that specific topic.
And when you say being looked at, Marcus, where, like?
So from the police reform bill, so that's
From
going to be something that's going to come down as far as, I think some type of oversight may be in there, but not, I don't know necessarily from an independent like public or community oversight, but as far as I think internal investigations, I feel like that was something that was kind of in there and that will be talked about coming down from the police reform in either the July or December.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we're waiting to hear more before they really deep dive into what we need to do exactly. But I know the chief said he is all into, doing whatever he can to make, necessary changes and listen to the community.
Okay.
So that would be good feedback for her for now.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be helpful. I'll go back to her and let her know where we are with that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Amelia and Cynthia, I think, if we want to just touch base about the vigil that happened on the 20th, and I know, Cynthia, you wanted to just see if there was any feedback, discussion, what went well, what didn't, or things that could have been improved upon for those who helped organize and those who attended.
Exactly. I think we've had lots of, positive response to that. And it did happen right away. And it just happened that we had the meeting the next day so we could get on board. So one of the questions that's lingering there is, how do we get involved with things like demonstrations or vigils when we don't have a meeting the next day? And it really, to do an emergency meeting is quite laborious. So that's one of the things I think we all identified. But I think, Amelia worked very hard on the publicity, and a number of us used our relationship networks. Like I reached out to Darren still in Indianapolis right away, and she, who unknown to many people, but I knew has some part of her heritage is her grandfather is Chinese, and that she identifies as an ally and as part of the Asian American community. And it was very powerful, and I think in holding the whole experience at the beginning and the end. But that's, again, our networks, and people did all kinds of things to reach out. So following up on what Tina said, I think we all will be interested in feedback, things that went well or things that could be improved.
I thought the speakers were fantastic, the student speakers in particular, again, talking about youth and stepping up and leadership and stewardship. It was really, they were not pulling any punches. They came out there, they said what they needed to say, and I thought they were really, really effective. Amelia.
I think this is a perfect case study for the Rapid Response Committee, and I think we should begin with that when we get our steering committee together.
Marlene.
I think the most powerful thing about it, yes, the student speakers, but that it was all people from those communities who spoke. And to me, that was the most important piece, to hear from those people, not the rest of us who are not part of those communities. I think that was really powerful, and I was really appreciative, but I thought it all came together incredibly well. And I also was impressed with how the turnout, I thought it was an excellent turnout.
Anybody else have any feedback? Okay, thank you. It was great. I personally appreciated the effort, so thank you very much for that. Just a quick note on Pride banners. I got an email, kind of a harried call from Dan Matthews. There's a very short window apparently for the banners to go up on Chapel and Great Plain because there's a calendar, I had no idea, that the Historical Trust maintains. And there's a very short window to get these Pride banners produced and up. So I know that they have been approved, which is fantastic. It was just a matter of Paul Good getting in contact with somebody who could coordinate that with him. So while it's been approved, I don't actually know if it's going to happen this year because we're already now in mid-April. But the good news is that they were approved. And so if it works out with the calendar and the production of the banners, then they will be up in June. So that's.
So
Tina,
you said
who was the group? Who was the group who asked for it?
It was the head of the Needham, I think the historical trust or they kind of manage historical properties land. I'm not quite sure because I know we've had historical buildings, those types of things that they manage. It's a privately funded group, I believe. They take donations. I've had a little bit of interaction with them with the small business community because there's some buildings in the center that have been discussed with regards to how to use them or beautify them given their historical significance. But I'm a little unclear as to the organization and how that all runs. But you know, they'd like to get the banners up and running if it fits into the schedule. So
That's
fingers crossed.
amazing.
Yeah. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Jared and Sophia, anything from the high school? I know you guys have been working diligently to try to fill the seats that you will be vacating after you graduate. Thank you very much. Anything else you guys have to report on?
I think, I guess like a sort of small thing, sort of big thing. I don't know. There wasn't like any announcements about the killing of Dante Wright, but I don't think so. Not that I saw, unless Sophia saw differently. But I know teachers have definitely been very open about talking about that in classes from what I heard. I've had a few discussions in some of my classes, and I know some of my classmates said they've had even more discussions about that, which is very good, you know, as we go on with these. Definitely want more discussions happening.
Sophia, anything from you?
I know we also did the Own Your Peace video recently. It was like a kind of a Zoom sort of version of like the normal like activity sort of get together we would have during the school year during like one day. I thought it was like kind of effective, kind of since there wasn't really much talk about it until like the day of, where you were like expected to participate in your class, which left me kind of not really knowing what to do since I didn't have class at that time. So I think Own Your Peace is like an important sort of thing for the school to do. And I think there should be a little bit more talk about that sort of thing.
So what is the sort of the premise of the video, the project?
In past years, the premise was just kind of getting students together to have kind of more difficult like discussions about things like race and like acceptance and stuff in like the Needham community. So there would be like activities about like identity and like discussions with like adults and other members of the community. But this year it was just like a video of some members of like, I think, student council, just like talking in a video.
Okay.
Yeah, so also like in the past, part of it definitely was instead of a video, we'd actually have an assembly.
Yeah.
And so as she said, you know, it's just kind of people talking about a lot of personal experience about just kind of, I know, I want to say like 2 years ago now, because we didn't have it last year, I don't think. For example, you know, personal experiences regarding their experience as being an immigrant, experiences just like other race in general, you know, being part of different communities in this town. So it's more of a way to just bring together kind of the school to hear these experiences and kind of just feel like together.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions about that? Any other comments, questions about that? Jen, anything from the Real Coalition?
No, there's no updates.
Okay. So future meeting, so I have a shutdown for May 20th. He may or may not be able to. He has some personal stuff going on right now, so he's going to keep me sort of updated as we get closer to the next meeting date. Marcus, I have you down for the 17th of June.
Yeah, so I should be able to be just fine with that.
Okay, and then July and August are typically, which I did not know until a couple of days ago, the committee doesn't meet. So we don't have to discuss this now, but maybe at the next meeting before July, we just can decide whether or not you guys want to meet in July and August, or you want to take some time off. Personally, I could go either way. So, but we'll take some time to think about it and we can discuss it at the next meeting. Does that sound good? Okay. Anything else? Any other announcements, questions, comments, concerns? Look at you, Bud.
Oh, Bud goes first.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Wow, lovely. I had
Cynthia.
one other announcement, which I can just send out to people, but it's one of our kind of allied groups is the Needham Area Immigration Justice Task Force. And that group decided that, like many other groups, they wanted to get Jake Auchenslaus to come and, well, of course, virtually, to talk with people in a virtual setting. And the area is what's going on with immigration and the new administration, which is wide open, and it will be on Monday evening, May 10th, from 7:15 to 8:15, and he'll give a presentation, and then there'll be questions. So this is an opportunity to find out what's going on and to make your voice heard for our new representative. And
There
it's
is a
usual thing, register for it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a link on the agenda for that event. So
Oh, you already did it. Great. Oh,
it-
okay. I didn't see the update.
no, that's okay. That's all right. There's a lot on that on the
Thank you.
agenda.
But
So
just to put a plug in, because I don't very often bring things from the immigration. And we had Lydia Edwards spoke last week. She's a Boston City Council person, and we wanted to know what they're doing in Boston for undocumented immigrants. And one of the biggest things I heard is that they have a voucher system for housing in Boston that is for any resident, and so that your status, immigrant status, doesn't affect people, because so many of the federal or state housing, it does. And that's something that actually we could think about in Needham.
great. Thank you. Anybody else? Do I have a motion to, oh, Jared.
Just quickly, I know I'd reached out to you, you had reached out to Sophia and I about filling the spots just for us when we leave the committee. And I just want to say that there were 2 attendees tonight that just could come briefly. They were 2 students that said they were interested. They texted me, I saw a little while ago, saying that they were interested and they would like follow up with more steps. So I'll reach back out to them about that.
Okay, I gave you my contact information, so have them, if they have any questions, we can chat.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you guys very much for that. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Sophia,
Yes.
Cynthia,
Yes.
Jen. Amelia,
Yes.
Marcus,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Bud,
Yes.
Marlene.
Yes.
I am a yes. Thank you, guys. I will, you'll all be hearing from me soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.